Okay, so today we're here to talk about the Zion Hill First Baptist Church. It's one of the 4 historic sites that the city of Nacogdoches owns. We have the Stern-Huey House Museum and Library, the Durst Taylor Historic House and Gardens, the Nacogdoches Railroad Depot, and the Zion Hill Baptist Church is our current project. We've done 3 restorations so far, and Zion Hill is our 4th, and we're very excited to start. So first we're going to go over some of the history of Zion Hill, the congregation itself, the restoration we've done so far, and where we're going in the future. Zion Hill Baptist Church was started by Reverend Lawson Reed. He came from Louisiana to Texas in 1878. He was working as a cook on the Houston East and West Texas Railroad. He came to Nacogdoches, realized there was no African American Baptist congregation for him to join, so he started his own. This congregation was very, very healthy from the start. They actually had to move to 3 different locations before coming to Zion Hill. They started out under a brush arbor, then had a small building over on Logansport Street, then moved down to Park Street where the Zion Hill Cemetery currently is, and then to our Zion Hill Baptist Church. So they were healthy, thriving, growing rapidly, and Zion Hill was kind of the culmination of all that, to where they finally got a permanent building, a beautiful building, and had a professional architect work on it, had it built specifically for them, and made it their home for the next almost 100 years. So Zion Hill Baptist Church was the social cornerstone of the entire area from 1914 when it was built until the 1980s when they moved out. So Zion Hill was here for a very long time. The church itself was the cornerstone not only for worship, which of course was its main purpose, was to worship here as a church, but also weddings, receptions, anniversaries, funerals, meals that people had together, community meetings. A little bit of everything was done here at Zion Hill. So it was absolutely the cornerstone of our entire district, because Zion Hill wasn't the only community building here, but it was the cornerstone. There was other buildings like the Green Lantern Restaurant that was about a block away. People lived, played, worked in the Zion Hill district, so this was a very thriving community on its own, and then also within Nacogdoches. The congregation used this church until the 1980s when it fell into disrepair. There was actually talk of tearing it down in the 1970s because this church and this congregation was still thriving and growing. They were growing out of the walls pretty much. So there was talk of tearing the building down and have a good sized lot and building a new church. But thank goodness some of the elders stepped in and said, we're not tearing down our historic church, we'll renovate. So there were some renovations done here in the 1970s. We got some great red velvet carpet from that thank goodness is not here anymore. They did some great renovations to make the church viable for them for a few more years. But finally in the 1980s, they were absolutely outgrowing the building and moved to their current location over off the loop where they still are today. So the church was vacant for a few years, and then the Nacogdoches Community Action Group used it as an office building. They officed out of here for several years and did some social services work. And finally they realized that the church was in poor enough shape to where they couldn't office here anymore. So they moved out to a different building and essentially left the church. The building was vacant for a number of years, which for a historic building is very bad. Because if you think about in your house, if a window breaks, you replace it, and that's the end of it. In a historic building that's just left on its own, if a window breaks, it breaks and it stays broken. So you get rotten windowsills, you get, bugs and varmints and all sorts of things in the building, and it just causes everything around it to rot and break down. So the building was in very, very poor shape. We had walls that were pulling apart, we had windows that were broken out, the roof was rotted almost all the way through. It was rotted all the way through in one spot, and it was in very, very poor condition. Lucky for us, in 2000, the Nacogdoches County Historic Foundation stepped in. They acquired the church and said that they were going to restore it, with the understanding that once they did the outside, the city would then acquire the Zion Hill Church and they would do the inside and run it. So thank goodness for the Nacogdoches County Historic Foundation, because they really saved this building, because without it, it would have eventually caved in on itself. When the foundation got this building, they had a huge amount of work to do. We had 2 walls that were pulling apart, so they had to anchor them back together and actually tighten them, a few inches or a few centimeters every so often until they were level again. And we still have a cable running through to make sure those walls stay where they're supposed to. So they fixed walls, they repaired the roof, they replaced windows, they repainted the outside, they replaced an enormous amount of rotten wood, because old historic buildings, there's always rotten wood somewhere, and there was a lot of it. They also repaired what we lovingly call the bomb hole, where one spot of the roof had completely rotted through the roof, the ceiling, the balcony, all the pews under it, and the first floor, all the way into the basement. So they repaired that hole, which was a pretty big deal because the architecture of this place, since it was built by Diedrich Rolfs, is very precise because Diedrich Rolfs designed this building. It's a one of a kind. And so every single wall, every single pew is a different size, and it's fit specifically in one part. So on the bomb hole portion, every different board was a different size and went in a certain spot. So they had to repair that, which is a huge undertaking. And the Nacogdoches County Historic Foundation, they even went above and beyond. They had agreed to do a certain amount of things for the building and then hand it over to the city. When they had finished their items, they kind of said, hey, we want to do a little bit more. Can we keep going? And of course we said yes. Overall, they spent over $400,000 on the outside of this building, and then turned it over to the city in 2010, which is kind of where we are today. The city has possession of the Zion Hill Baptist Church, and it is our job to restore the inside and then open it. We still have quite a ways to go. We have a beautiful building on the outside that is secure. It's not going to fall down. No new damage is being done, but we still have an inside that, while it still is beautiful and charming, there's no electricity, there's no plumbing, it is not accessible at all to people with any kind of disability, anything like that, and so we are left with a huge undertaking. We are still currently raising money, writing grants to work on the inside. Once we finish, we will of course have a fully functional heating and air conditioning unit. We will have lights throughout the building. We will have working plumbing and restrooms. We will actually be able to get people with any sort of disabilities from the bottom floor, which will be our main entrance, up to the main floor, which involves a lift, and we also have to have ramps, and so all that will be installed. We also have to think about things as far as parking, landscaping, exhibits, officing the place, and so we still have quite a ways to go, but we are working on it. Once this building is open to the public, it will not only be a rental space, which it will be, we'll have rentals for weddings, for receptions, for community meetings, for events, but it'll also have a museum on the African American history here in Nacogdoches, which is sorely needed. We'll talk mainly about the history of the congregation of the Zion Hill Baptist Church, as well as the Zion Hill Historic District, which we are the cornerstone of, and then African American history in Nacogdoches. So that will be included, as well as some information about Diedrich Rolfs, who is the architect of the building, the architecture, because he really put a lot of love into this building, and every little detail was done for a purpose. So we'd really like to talk about that. We are well on our way to restoring the building. We are still raising money. Zion Hill Baptist Church was built in 1914 for $7,223. And the interior, or the overall restoration process, is going to cost about 180 times that much. The city of Nacogdoches has about $800,000 in reserve for it. Our entire project cost, though, is well over $1 million, and so we are still in the fundraising process. There's a couple different ways people can get involved, which is one of the questions we get the most. We tell them that you can give us or let us use historic photos of Zion Hill Baptist Church. We have only one historic photo from about 1913, and we have nothing before that, which we know photography was not as common as it is today, so those are a little bit harder to come by. But if you have pictures of the exterior or interior of the building that you would let us use or borrow or use for reference, that would be wonderful. Any information about the church, as far as if you were baptized here, if you got married here, went to Sunday school, we would love to have those personal stories so we could use them in the exhibits in the building. We want to know where the Sunday school classes were, who taught them, how many kids were in them, exactly what part of the building they were in. So we want to know everything we can about the building. And then, of course, if you're able to or willing to, donating money to help us restore the inside is always a huge help. We're happy to have any input, any information, any involvement from Nacogdoches, from anybody in the county, anybody in the city, anybody who's been involved in this church. We would love to have their information. So you can contact us by contacting the city's Historic Sites Department. Follow us on Facebook at NAC Historic Sites. We post information. It's a great way to get a hold of us, and we'd love for everyone to be involved. Because Zion Hill Baptist Church has always been such a part of the community, we want to take it back to that. We want to restore this to a place that anybody can feel comfortable coming to. We'll have a great amount of information on the Zion Hill District, on this congregation, and we want everyone to think of this as the community spot again. So that's what we're working towards today. it is going to happen. We're very excited about the amount of enthusiasm we've heard lately and the amount of input we've had from people. So we think this is really only the beginning, and we're really excited about it.